People who idolized someone they later found out was a piece of trash. What happened? I aspired to be as cool as Hyde in that 70s show at one point. He's in prison now for rape. He was also straight up a hitman for Scientology. He killed a guy's dog for criticizing the church. Wow, what did the dog say? Tough to match Bill Cosby. America has never loved anyone as unanimously as Bill Cosby. The Cosby Show was the #1 show in the country. Rumors of him drugging women started to trickle out on the early internet. I was a kid in the 80s, my family watched The Cosby Show every week. Growing up, he was a wholesome dad figure on the level of Mr. Rogers. The betrayal felt personal. Way back in the early era of YouTube when all the classic big names like Markiplier and PewDiePie were just getting their start, there was another big Let's Player who went by Cryotic and would often hang out with them and do videos together. Cry's style of Let's Play was a lot more chill and relaxed, and he had a cute voice and funny sense of humor, so I actually liked his videos the most out of the three. His upload schedule slowed down after a while and he didn't seem to transition into the streamer era as well as other creators did. Then in 2019 he admitted to grooming several teenage girls behind his fiancée's back. Yeah, I liked him and regularly watched his videos, and it really upset me.
Hey, don't scroll to the next thread, please just subscribe, like and hit the bell, or you will miss the next wild Reddit story. I'm already working on it, so see you in the next video.
We're gonna see the usual names on this thread, so let's go with someone different, Greg Mortensen. You may remember him as the author who wrote 3 Cups of Tea. He captivated the post-9/11 world with his stories of traveling Afghanistan and Pakistan and building schools for girls. I actually met Greg at a fundraiser when I was very young and my family donated to the Central Asia Institute. It turns out my other childhood hero Jon Krakauer, the guy who wrote Into Thin Air and Into the Wild, basically debunked his entire life story. Most of the schools were never built and Greg spent all his money traveling around on the non-profit circuit. This is incredibly ironic because in his book his initial backer, Gene Horney, warns Greg explicitly not to do this. Poor Gene died before he saw how right his initial suspicion was. It's honestly jaded me against non-profits ever since. Edit. Since this gained traction I have to make a joke that 2011 Greg Mortensen vs. Jon Krakauer was like Duel of the Fates for suburban outdoorsy white guys. Epic times indeed. Turns out my favorite high school English teacher was a pedo. He's now in jail. He taught me to write well, and to enjoy writing. 3 years after his class and I tied for highest honors in English. I still write for fun. And now 30 years later a major part of who I am is tied to that person. We had a somewhat similar situation at our school. Our HS principal was pretty popular amongst the kids. However, he had a year-end party for the cheerleaders each year at his house on the lake, and my junior, I think, year one of the girls noticed a light shining through the mirror in a bathroom. It turned out he had been recording the girls changing, and it had likely been going on for years. I had finally gotten clean again and stayed that way 3 weeks when he decided to give me a surprise because I'd done so well. 2 loaded up shots for a night off. Didn't sleep for 4 days after that. He knew what he was doing. It was the same weekend he introduced me to another drug to add in so I could sleep. Bet you can guess what that was. I was easier to control when I was using. He pulled this more than once because I'd get clean and decide I no longer deserved to have my bones broken on the regular. I was too depressed from it all to say no when he would put it in front of me. I left 4 months ago. I haven't used since very shortly after I left. Fuck you, Steve. May your next time being Narcan feel like a bullet to the chest, just like my last one did. Well, I didn't idolize him but definitely looked up to him, guy I went to college with and we're still in the same friend group many years later, kind of. We knew he wasn't the greatest guy in the world and then, served in Congress, and while in DC he cheated on his wife, the mother of his 3 young children. Often, she found out when her gyno told her she had an STD. He became governor of my state and early in his 3rd term had to accept a plea deal with the feds, resign, go to federal prison. He learned nothing, basically told the feds, catch me if you can. They did. He went back to federal prison again. Roland? Yep. He went to my high school, before my time though. My high school does not have a good track record when it comes to politicians. A mangaka from Japan came over to Honolulu and opened a manga workshop for potential students. I signed up, and was one of the 8 or 9. Since the mangaka was Japanese and didn't speak any English, and I was the only one who spoke Japanese, my mom's Japanese, I was made the interpreter/representative despite being the youngest of the group, and I hadn't even graduated then. At first, I agreed to the task, but here's the thing, I didn't know all these jargons and terms used by mangaka. That's one of the reasons why I signed up to the class in the first place, and I was new to digital drawing. I didn't have a tablet back then, so I wasn't doing a good job at it, and he'd chew me out for making his lessons not go smoothly. Just to be clear, I wasn't being paid for it. He also made me translate documents and such for other things, and I helped out, but over time, I came to the realization that he was just using me. He even tried to make me get a job as a tutor at the place where he held his classes, and tried to take my pay, but since I wanted to focus on my studies, I declined, which he wasn't too pleased about. I later confronted him, and when I told him that I'm not his servant, he snapped back at me, saying that he wasn't being paid to teach us at all. Ultimately, I just dipped from that group and went no contact with that asshole. Edit, I wasn't being paid for it. I had a similar experience working for a Japanese musician whom I had really admired. He wasn't hugely famous or anything, but he was well respected within a small subgenre of a subgenre because a band he had been in previously were considered progenitors of that style. He ended up being, in one word, mean. When I started work I made very clear I had no experience, I was still a student, barely out of my teens, but I was a quick learner with a good attitude. I was thrown in the deep end with no guidance whatsoever and torn down every time I screwed up, and everything I did was screwing up. There were unexplained rules and they were constantly changing. I first thought he had hired me to be a token gaijin, but when I reflect more on it, I think it was because I was so star-struck and eager to please that I was easy to bully. His bandmates were much kinder and more humble, but I never forgot his cruelty. It fucked me up for a long time. I truly started to believe that I was stupid, a failure, couldn't follow directions. I wonder if it is the root of my persistent imposter syndrome. Anyway, I take comfort in the fact that none of his projects have ever risen to the level of that very first seminal band, and they never will because he keeps losing bandmates, probably on account of being such a shriveled little dick. Edit, please stop trying to guess. I can confidently assure you that it's not your fave. The person, the band, the genre, were all very niche, even at the height of the zeitgeist. I'm also most likely much older than you and am referring to an entirely different time period than what you're thinking. My sister used to listen to the Lost Prophets. The lead singer was recently murdered in prison in the UK. He was a deeply disturbed pedophile who targeted the babies of his female fans who were single mothers. I was very disappointed when it was revealed that Lance Armstrong had been doping for most of his career, and had forced others to do it. I had believed his book when he wrote about his natural attributes to make him a great cyclist. I threw out all my Live Strong stuff and his book. Pixar was the storytelling studio from 1995 to 2010, and John Lasseter was one of the main people behind that. He revitalized Disney after that, and turned it into a juggernaut. His storytelling instincts were second to none. I used to listen to everything I could find where he talked about storytelling in order to be a better writer. When it came out that he was a creep, it was very hard on me. I guess he was just a creep, compared to so many other people who were cancelled. He just edged into making people uncomfortable territory. Still, it ruined my perception of him. Similarly, Kevin Spacey was my favorite actor. In 2002 I worked at this fancy restaurant with a piano bar attached. The very hot bartender had spent a decade trying to break into acting before he came back home to defocus learn filmmaking. He would have been late 20s at the time. He told me this story about how he was at this big party with a bunch of Hollywood stars and it was in the middle of nowhere. He was pretty drunk and was having a hard time finding a cab when Kevin Spacey offered him a ride. And spent the entire drive fending off Spacey's advances. He would have been early 20s. He was not homophobic but was so very creeped out. When those allegations came out, I was not surprised. In my early 20s, I made this friend. He was really cool, with an exciting job. He was super kind to me when I was going through a hard time. We messaged every day. He would even send me presents and not let me pay him back. When we'd been friends for about 3 years, he suddenly cut off a lot of friends, including me. He later told me he was having a mental breakdown. It was hard to accept, because I thought he and I had been uniquely special to each other, and I was a little bit in love with him. I assumed because I was autistic and had depression, I wasn't cool enough for him, and he had dropped me from his life because he was sick of pitying me or whatever. Years later, he added me back on social media. We got talking and he was complimenting me a lot. We were having a lot of really good conversation, back to being really good friends. We arranged to meet. It was like love at first sight. We became a couple right away. It was magical. We had this sense of, life has led me to you. He introduced me to his parents a couple of weeks later. He told me I was the best girlfriend he'd ever had and he wanted to be with me forever. He was the best partner I'd ever had. For 3 months. One day I didn't want to have sex, I said I adored him and loved our sex life, I was just depressed that day. And he kicked off. After that he was cold with me. The loving messages throughout the day stopped. Sometimes he'd just disappear and not explain it. He started flirting with waitresses in front of me, even calling them by the pet name he called me. He would buy me little presents like a fridge magnet, without me asking, then complain about how much money he spent. He told me his parents had said I was cold and arrogant, and when I asked his parents if I'd done anything wrong, they said they loved me. He was obsessed with the idea that I thought I was too good for him. He had full-on delusions that I had said he was ugly and mocked his career, things that categorically didn't happen, or even resemble anything that happened. He became obsessed with telling me I was a horrible person. When we were out together, he would walk meters out in front of me. I am 99% certain he was still talking to his ex, even though he told me she was stupid and boring and he was embarrassed to be seen with her. Our last weekend together, I was staying with him, and I had a killer migraine and had to mostly stay in bed. He gave me the silent treatment all day. I had done nothing to anger him, but he didn't speak to me, didn't let me get food from the kitchen, etc. Because of the migraine I couldn't leave and drive home. I broke up with him after a month of seeing how bad he was after the love bombing ended. He didn't try to win me back, but he checked my social media obsessively until I blocked him. Then he made up fake accounts to harass me. Within 3 weeks of me breaking up with him, he got back with his ex and messaged me a picture of them together. That lasted for about a week. Now he is dating a drug addict with severe mental health problems, who looks like a late-stage Amy Winehouse. She looks so vulnerable and I now see him as being predatory. When I think about what a wonderful friend he was for years, I feel in shock. How can they be the same person? It's chilling that most people who meet him still think he is one of the nicest people in the entire world. It's funny, I just commented this earlier. You never really know somebody if you haven't dated them. Everyone thinks my ex is the nicest dude ever, and to be fair he does go out of his way to do nice things for strangers sometimes. But behind closed doors he was a POS.